Hello, everybody, and welcome to part number two of the Mock Draft 1.0 by your favorite guys at A Work of Progress. I am the first member, Jordan Menning, of the A Work in Progress, and this is our second part of our first round mock draft of the 32 picks with no trades. Quickly, before I introduce my partner, I'll go through picks 1 through 10. If you did miss that, go ahead and go check that out. That's the first part that we just recorded. Um, Go ahead and check that out if you please. First to the Cincinnati Bengals, we had quarterback Joe Burrow from LSU. Second, we had Washington Redskins taking Chase Young, edge rusher out of Ohio State. Third, we had Jeff Okudah, cornerback from Ohio State, going to the Lions. Number four, we had Tristan Wirfs, offensive tackle, going to Iowa to the New York, from Iowa going to the Jets, excuse me. At number five, we had the Miami Dolphins selecting Tua Tagovailoa, quarterback, Alabama. And at number six, we had Justin Herbert, quarterback from Oregon, going to the LA Chargers. At number seven, we had Isaiah Simmons, linebacker from Clemson, going to the Carolina Panthers. At number eight, we had Mekhi Becton, offensive tackle from Louisville, going to the Cardinals. At number nine, Jacksonville Jaguars, we have selecting Derek Brown, D lineman from Auburn. And last but not least, we have the Cleveland Browns selecting Andrew Thomas, offensive tackle out of Georgia. So, to get you back into the slate of things, this is completely Zach and I's opinion. Um, Obviously, I'll introduce my partner here in a second. So, but again, this has nothing to do with BGSU, the NFL, anything like that. This is just completely our opinion. Um, that's what we do here. Again, this is NFL, and we're trying this out because this is what we want to do with our futures, or is do something in the sports media. So that's why we're doing this now. Um, but without further ado, I'll introduce my other half to this show. Introducing the second half of A Work in Progress, Mr. Zach Smith.
Hey everybody, how you doing? Um, so again, this is just purely our opinion. Now, you might be asking after that first video where it was pretty much cut and paste, a lot of stuff like that. You might be asking, well, what makes these two guys qualified? Well, I don't want to sound dramatic here, but I'm a self-proclaimed NFL expert. I watch more football sometimes than I get sleep, which is not probably a good thing, but hey, it's all good. It's a grand time talking football. Jordan and I both watch way too much football. We both are big fans of very big NFL teams. Jordan, the Packers, and myself, the Steelers. So it's interesting in that regard. But we've put quite a bit of time looking at mock drafts. He and I both have been looking at them. We created our own, and then we've had a couple hours worth of conversation to come down with this possible list. Again, nothing is set in stone. The draft is on February 23rd, live from your living room.
April.
So
It's all right. Everybody
it's
takes Hannah Montana.
So it's going to be fantastic. So do tune in. This is just what Jordan and I are going to think happens. Obviously, trades will happen. Obviously, people are going to want to move up and down based on players that they have or will acquire. For example, breaking news today on April 18th, Leonard Fournette of the Jacksonville Jaguars is on the trade block. So we'll see how how stuff like that all reacts. But obviously, this is as it stands right now, where the rosters are at right now. And that's pretty much it for, I think, an intro. We would have scripted the intro out a little more, but obviously it's a work in progress. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. We finished off at 10 on our last video. If you haven't watched that, go ahead and look at that. We go completely in depth on the top 10 picks in this draft. But with number 11, that brings the New York Jets up to the podium. And with the 11th pick in the 2020 NFL draft, Jordan and I have the New York Jets selecting Jerry Jeudy, wide receiver out of Alabama. Now, for us, this makes a ton of sense. Judy had Tua throwing to him for the past 2 years. He has caught over 2,000 yards over those past 2 seasons, 24 touchdowns. He's had no fumbles, no turnovers, or anything like that. This past season, 77 receptions, 1,100 yards, 10 touchdowns. He averaged 15 yards a catch. And obviously, great hands, great speed. He stands at 6'1", 192 pounds, and he goes to a system that desperately needs some wide receiver help. You got Sam Darnold there. Obviously, you got Le'Veon Bell, Ty Montgomery, but after Robbie Anderson left, you really don't have a lot as in terms of wide receiver depth. You could also see an offensive lineman go this far, but at this moment in time, we don't see many good ones remaining after a lot of them went in the first 10 picks. We think Jerry Jeudy is the best pick here. You're going to go give Sam Darnold a true number one receiver with great hands, great separation. He's a fantastic route runner, and he's going to just open up a couple of running lanes for Le'Veon Bell, while at the same time getting those easy reception yards for Sam Darnold in the AFC East.
Mhm. I think so too. I think that's a great analysis. I think that's exactly what the Jets need is giving Sam Darnold developing and a quarterback that's developing like Sam Darnold is. I think something like that is perfect for him. I don't think that the Jets need to question maybe much. I think the only thing they would maybe need to question is offensive tackle, but um, I think that's probably about. Um, I think I would go Judy here, especially since it's the best wide receiver on this in this class, in my opinion. I think you take the best wide receiver available after the top 10 didn't want to go for one in our mock. I think at 11, I think that's a great get for the Jets and Jerry Judy. So moving on now to the Las Vegas Raiders, which is very weird to say already. Um, we have their first pick of this draft. This is their pick. The latter pick that they do have is from the Chicago Bears at 19, but obviously we will get to that. This one for the Raiders, we have the next wide receiver off the board, a wide receiver 2 picks in a row. We have C.D. Lamb, wide receiver out of Oklahoma. Now, CeeDee Lamb, people are saying his combine wasn't great. He only had a 4.5 40. He only had 11 reps on the bench, and his vert and his broad jump are pretty decent. But again, a lot of people are saying he may slide further than 12 or like the top 15 just because his combine was not great. CeeDee Lamb was at a great system under Lincoln Riley in Oklahoma. He had a great couple of quarterbacks, being Jalen Hurts and Kyler Murray. The past 2 years, that's however long he's been there. The past 2 years, he's had two great quarterbacks to throw to him and fun air raid systems to watch under Lincoln Riley. Um, Especially in an air raid system like that, you got to have receivers that can fly down the field. And that's exactly what the Raiders are going to get right here with CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb immediately can be a starter on that Vegas offense. And if Derek Carr obviously is still wanting to be their option at quarterback, if John Gruden doesn't want to lean toward getting somebody maybe like Jordan Love at 19, which would be a very interesting play at 19. If John Gruden and Mike Mayock don't want to go for a quarterback there at 19, they get CeeDee Lamb at 12, and they can give Derek Carr a target. I think Zach and I were talking when we were talking about this pick, and we were saying like Antonio Brown was supposed to be their receiver for the next 4 or 5 years when he signed his contract. He was supposed to be the guy. They got Tyrell Williams to line up in the slot. He's a quick, lanky guy that can go into the slot. He's one of the guys that can get 4 catches for 158 yards and a touchdown in a game. He's that type of guy. He's a big play threat, but he was lined up on the outside, so he got too much attention and he didn't get a lot of yards after the catch, which is what he specializes in. So you put CeeDee Lamb somewhere in this system, and you can get Tyrell Williams back down into the slot. You can immediately put CeeDee Lamb up there, um, and make your receiving core so much better than it already was by getting one of the well. In my opinion, I think tied for the second with another receiver on this board, but that's just me. Um, but yeah, I think that's where we kind of decided the Raiders would go here.
Yeah, and the thing is that the Raiders are looking for a playmaker. You have Josh Jacobs back there, but at the moment you don't see anybody that jumps off the page at you that screams, "Oh God, we got to go ahead and cover this guy." Jordan and I both kind of consensusly agreed that a wide receiver needed to go here. They just signed Marcus Mariota in free agency. You have a guy like Derek Carr still to lead the offense. You have Darren Waller already there, a solid defense around him. I think, though, that this pick needs to be wide receiver, and CeeDee Lamb is the best on the board at this point.
I agree.
Going on to number 13, we have the first like true D lineman going off the board right here, where we have at pick number 13 the San Francisco 49ers from the Indianapolis Colts. This is a pick they received from trading DeForest Buckner. We had the 49ers taking Javon Kinlaw, edge rusher out of South Carolina. Now, let me preface this by saying that I really do think that the 49ers will trade this pick. Of course, though, being in a mock where there are no first round picks that are being traded, Javon Kinlaw is a perfect fit here. You trade away DeForest Buckner, who was only efficient when Nick Bosa got there. You suddenly bring in a guy like Kinlaw, who played in the SEC, or was it the ACC? I don't remember. It's been a long day. Sorry.
Yeah, Javon Kinlaw, South Carolina.
Javon Kinlaw out of South Carolina this past year, 6 sacks, 15 solo tackles. He's the guy who can come in and you can plug and play right away and maintain that solid defensive front. You've got Nick Bosa still, Eric Armstead. You've got a good group of guys already there. And you bring in Kinlaw, who's just another absolute monster in that NFC West. When you're in a division with the Rams, the Seahawks, and all these other guys, Kinlaw is going to be able to come in and make a true difference. The only other place I could see them going with this pick is wide receiver, but if they stay in this pick, Kinlaw's the best on this board.
I think so too. I think they rolled. And like you said too, they got this pick for getting rid of DeForest Buckner. This is the second interior line that we have taken off the board because of Derek Brown going to Jacksonville. So their next best option would be Javon Kinlaw. And I mean, both of them are very good. Obviously, I think if Derek Brown slides to 13 and the Niners keep it, that's 100% where they're going to go. But again, I think this is where they're going to have to go to try to replace DeForest Buckner and keep the young, fast, quick defensive lineman going on their team. But yeah. So the next person that we have going off the board to the newly refurbished Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Our top couple team needs that we have right here are offensive tackle, running back, wide receiver, interior O line, and quarterback. So, without further ado, we did go offensive tackle and we took the best one off of the board right here, and we have Jedrick Wills, offensive tackle out of Alabama. Jedrick Wills is a powerhouse. He is the best offensive tackle that is left on the board after Andrew Thomas, Mekhi Becton, Tristan Wirfs. So I still think Tampa Bay gets a good player here. He's 6'4", 312. He ran a 5.0540, so he ran a pretty quick 40 for an offensive tackle. So I think that's pretty impressive for a 6'4", 312 guy to run a 5.0540. Um, he can run. He's quick. He played in the SEC, being in Alabama. He had to block Tua. He's going to be a junior. He was a junior, so he's going to have to be that guy to protect, especially in a system like Alabama where you're going to have to protect good quarterbacks like your Tua. And then now they're going to have like Mac Jones and stuff now if he didn't leave. But you have a big responsibility blocking Tua in your backfield, and especially now that Tom Brady is there in Tampa Bay. That's why Zach and I really didn't think twice about this pick when it came up. I had this In my original mock that I made, this is where I had Jedrick Wills going, is right here to Tampa Bay. Like I said, we really didn't think twice. Um, Tampa Bay now is in a win now mentality. They got Tom Brady, the greatest of all time. They are trying to get as close to the Super Bowl or to the Super Bowl as they possibly can, and it's got to be right now. So if you want to do that, you got to be able to protect Tom Brady. He's old. He's 42 or 43, one of the two. You got to be able to protect Tom Brady if you're the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Um, and the best way is to go best value on offensive line right here. And that's what Tampa Bay gets with Jedrick Wills blocking Tom Brady, and also for their young running backs and Peyton Barber and Ronnie Jones.
Yeah, going along with this pick, there's a lot of analysts who believe Wills could go as the first overall offensive tackle taken off this board. Wills is that good. He's a solid run blocker. He's a solid pass blocker, and he's going to be able to do exactly what the Buccaneers need in this win now mentality. Running back also makes sense, but it makes zero sense to take a running back at 14 in this draft. This isn't the type of draft that has like a Saquon Barkley or definitive number one back. So I truly believe that offensive tackle is the best pick here. And Wills is the best on the board right now. He's the last, main offensive tackle, and it's going to come down to that. And I think Wills being the pass blocker for Tom Brady, you got to protect the guy. He's got his receivers now. Now you just got to give him an opportunity to throw the ball.
For sure.
That'll move us on to pick number 15 in this draft, which currently belongs to the Denver Broncos. And we have the Denver Broncos taking Henry Ruggs III, wide receiver out of Alabama. Now, Henry Ruggs is a junior, and he's 6 feet tall, 190 pounds. He's a phenomenal freak of an athlete. 40 catches, 746 yards, 7 touchdowns this past year. He averaged just under 19 a carry. He's a burner, an absolute burner. You line him up anywhere on the field, and he's going to be able to go. And especially after Emmanuel Sanders gets traded away midseason and Cortland Sutton picked up a lot of slack, he needs some help. You've got arguably the most dynamic backfield in the NFL with Phillip Lindsay and Melvin Gordon. You also have a pretty solid defense. Derwin James, Joey Bosa, you got Ingram. There's a lot of pieces right here. And Phillip Rivers just consistently turned the ball over. That was the big thing with him. And if he doesn't turn the ball over all that much, that Chargers team is right back in it from the year before. Enter in Ruggs, who can come in, make a difference right away. And, it's a big step. And I don't know why I started going into the Chiefs or the Chargers. I started going to the Chargers defense because I thought of Melvin Gordon
Mm-hmm.
along that team, but still, you got Von Miller and Bradley Chubb. It's still a solid defense, so may as well make Drew Lock's time a little easier, and you can go ahead and give him a guy like Ruggs. So you got Sutton, you got Ruggs, you got two solid offensive running backs, and then you've got a tight end and Noah Fant. It's really a can't miss pick right here for the Denver Broncos.
Oh yeah. Yep. Like I said, this is another pick that Zach and I had with 14 and 15 right here that we really didn't have thoughts about it. We knew offensive tackle and wide receiver were top needs for these teams 100%. So they're going to go with their best option. And like Zach said too, Henry Ruggs is quick. He can get down the field. And Cortland Sutton doesn't have a lot of help right now. And Cortland Sutton is a great number two receiver when he can be open and doesn't get a lot of attention. And Henry Ruggs running down the field will definitely draw a little bit of attention away from Cortland Sutton to also get the ball. So um, at number 16, we have the Atlanta Falcons, and we have them taking Clavon Chason, edge rusher from LSU. And Clavon Chason right here, he fits into an Atlanta team who on defense has very much struggled the last couple of years. Um, he fits in on a pass rush that really there's not a lot of great pass rush on their team now. He's 6'3", 254. He's a great prospect to get, especially at 16, to where he's not like the best edge rusher on the board, but for value here, it's great value at number 16. You still get a great pick, a great player to come in. The only better edge rusher that we have taken so far right now is Chase Young, and Chase Young is Chase Young. So I think right here for Chase on is a great pick. Um, you just got rid of, I think Vic Beasley just left in free agency. They need to go younger with their pass rush to get to the quarterbacks in that division, especially Tom Brady just came to your division. I mean, you have Drew Brees, and now Teddy Bridgewater is also on the Panthers. So you're going to have to get a little bit of pressure on some of these quarterbacks, especially the ones that are some of the greatest that have ever played in Drew Brees and Tom Brady. So you put Clavon Chase on your edge, you get a little bit of attention taken off of you here too. So I think this pick for the Falcons, we discussed a little bit, but I think we both wanted defense here. Um, I originally had Javon Kinlaw, but again, Javon Kinlaw just went 13 to the Niners. Again, so we were 100% thinking D line to help that Falcons defense. Their offense won them games after they had went 1-7, but their defense definitely improving toward the latter part of the season is going to help win them games, and I think they realize that and get Chase on here.
Yeah, and the other big reason that we went Clavon Chase on here is not only can he line up and play edge, but he can also line up as a linebacker.
Mhm.
That's where he's the most skilled. You really like guys who are Swiss Army knives, and that's what Chase on really brings to the table for the Falcons. You're very right. There's a lot of other needs. I mean, Desmond Trufant is not in his prime, but he was still a big piece. He's gone. But you still have a solid defense, and Chase On's going to be able to get off the edge quickly and be able to chase down some of these big quarterbacks and really put some pressure on this other side of the ball. The Falcons' offense looks fantastic on paper. This defense needs to match that stride, and I think Chase On would make a leaps and bounds type of effort. That'll take us on to pick number 17. And with the 17th overall pick, the Dallas Cowboys, Jerry's World, better yet, takes AJ Epinesa, defensive end out of Iowa. Now, Epinesa has the skill to be a top 5 player in this draft. I want to preface that. But the Cowboys benefit heavily from him falling down draft boards. The Cowboys, one of the most heavily hit teams in the free agency pool this year, losing players such as Byron Jones. You had players like Byron Jones. I already said Byron Jones. Robert Quinn leaving because you couldn't afford to pay him. You had the franchise tag Dak Prescott, who has nothing left to prove to this organization. Amari Cooper rightfully got paid. Jason Witten walked away. This team really, really was hurt. But that means you can bring in a guy like Epinesa, who is one of the most consistent guys in the Big Ten the past 2 seasons. 10 and a half sacks in 2018, 11 and a half sacks in 2019, 32 solo tackles, 4 forced fumbles last year with the Hawkeyes, going up against some great Big Ten opponents. Ohio State, Michigan State, Wisconsin. He can immediately plug in and play in an NFC East that is arguably one of the worst divisions in football. Philadelphia is going to come and make a heavy, strong push, but with Epinesa, that defense can stay right there with them. You still have guys like Sean Lee, DeMarcus Lawrence, Leighton Vander Esch is still back there. You do need help at corner and a couple of other key positions on defense, as well as maybe some offensive help for Dak Prescott after Travis Frederick departed. But overall, I think AJ Epinesa is a solid pick right here. 6'6", 280 pounds out of Glen Carbon, Illinois. A junior, so he's young. He's got time to mold, and he's going to seriously benefit from falling here.
Mhm. I think so too, and you hit the nail right on the head. Um, with their different players leaving and I mean, their front office is just so inconsistent on their players right now, and I don't know. In my personal opinion, I personally think they had one of um, the worst free agencies out of all the teams. That's just me. But eh, I don't I don't think they had great free agency. So like you said too, you hit the nail right on the head. Like getting somebody like this that can be a playmaker on defense is exactly what they need right now for the Cowboys. Um, Moving on to the second pick that the Dolphins have out of three in the first round. This is the pick that they get from the Pittsburgh Steelers at number 18. And at number 18, Zach and I have them taking Xavier McKinney, safety out of Alabama. We really, again, the last couple that I've done, we really um, did not have to have a lot of discussion. I originally had them taking McKinney here, and so did Zach. We think this is a great pick here, 18, and we both had the same logic. Um, they just got Byron Jones as another corner. They have Xavier Howard at the other corner. They have Eric Rowe and Adrian Colbert as their other safety. So somebody to help their safety group and somebody that can start from day one in that young secondary would be phenomenal for them. And like I said, somebody like that can come in, start from day one on that young defense. Their defense wasn't great last year, but again, it's the Dolphins. They didn't. There's a lot of games that the Dolphins did not really give them a lot of help. So, in turn, that brings in Xavier McKinney, a great safety out of Bama. He's quick, he's fast. He played in the SEC. He was constantly being on with Nick Saban. If you're recruited, you can get in and start at Alabama. You're already a top-notch player in college football. So that's already one good thing about being from being from Bama. Um, and I think that shows the type of player that he is and the type of player that he could be. A lot of people are saying he's probably the next Haha Clinton Dix because this is around where he was picked 4 or 5 drafts ago to the Packers around right 20, I think, or 21, like 4 or 5 years ago is where he was picked to my Packers. Um, so again, a lot of people are saying he's the next HaHa Clinton Dix. He can do a lot of what HaHa Clinton Dix used to do for Nick Saban at Bama. So again, this is another pick right here where Zach and I really didn't have to banter back and forth on why we think which is better. Um, just from how perfect this is slots in for Miami right here.
Yeah, and the other very nice thing about having three first round picks is that you can go for need, but you can also really pick best player available. Their biggest catch so far was Tua at pick number 5. So you get your quarterback of the future, and yes, you can argue, well, maybe we can go for a guy like T. Higgins or Justin Jefferson and give another true number one wide receiver to Tua. Well, I mean, you have Devontae Parker. You can argue, well, maybe you go get a running back here, but I don't think you need to go for a running back this high. You could argue offensive line, but there's no really number one big offensive line guy. And in research of that Miami Dolphins defense last year, and all things considered, they weren't bad as in terms of total yards given up. They were scored upon a lot, but mainly from like week 4 or week 5 on, when they were already like 0-6. They really kicked up the gas, and you really saw it. And it's already a pretty scary front. You got Christian Wilkins up there. You went and got Kyle Van Noy in free agency. You've got a solid secondary. And Xavier McKinney is a guy who likes to play down in the box. He's a guy who can blitz. He's a guy who can stay back and play coverage. He's a true safety who can just stay back in range. And in an AFC East again that now does not have Tom Brady, it opens the door. And that backfield of McKinney, Eric Rowe, Byron Jones, and Xavier Howard immediately can start pressuring guys like Josh Allen and Sam Darnold. So it's going to be a good pick here, and I think Xavier McKinney is the best on the board at this point, and especially seeing that they traded away Minkah Fitzpatrick to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Not Henderson, Xavier McKinney just comes in and fills that hole right back.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes us to pick number 19. At pick number 19, we have the Las Vegas Raiders. This pick coming from the Bears from their pick of Khalil Mack 2 years ago. So this is the last time that the Raiders will not have a first round pick from that Khalil Mack trade. We have them taking C.J. Henderson, cornerback out of the Florida area. Now, let's preface this by saying that the Raiders have been getting better, like dramatically better. Earlier, we had the Raiders taking a wide receiver to go ahead and give some help to a struggling offense. We can argue maybe going getting another receiver here, or maybe another back for Josh Jacobs, but you really don't need it. Therefore, we go with Henderson. After the Raiders missed out on signing Eli Apple, Henderson immediately fills a huge need. He's 6'1", he's 202 pounds. He is just a ball hawk of a corner. 26 solo tackles, 11 passes defended. Um, this past year, 7 assists, 1 sack. He can go after the quarterback. He can stay back in coverage. He's an SEC guy. Um, it's it's that type of pick here. It's you can go out and get C.J. Henderson. He solidifies a backfield. And the Raiders, who have legitimate playoff aspirations, can continue to contend.
Mhm. I think so too. Like you said, that's one of their only spots like on defense that they haven't really addressed a lot is corner, and I think you get the best corner right here. I think it's a great, like I said, Zach and I were talking about this too, and we were talking about CD Lamb at 12. Well, we're sitting here like, well, do you have to get CJ Henderson now? And we're like, honestly, and we had to go through all the next teams, and we all went through them, and we were saying not a lot of all of these teams don't really need corners. They have it as an issue, but it's not a real glaring issue. Wide receiver and corner is a problem for a couple of these teams, which we're going to get to here in a couple picks, I think, with Minnesota. These are just a couple teams that have a couple picks in the first round that just have glaring wide receiver corner issues, um, and I think they address that well with C.J. Henderson. Um, but moving on from the Vegas Raiders, those are their two picks that they get in this first round. We have another team that gets a second first round pick. This is a pick that the Jacksonville Jaguars have, their second pick of the first round from the Los Angeles Rams. So this is the last of the non playoff teams right here at pick number 20. And we have the Jacksonville Jaguars selecting Christian Fulton, cornerback out of LSU. Um, Jaguars, Zach alluded to it earlier, Jaguars are in full rebuild mode. There's talks of Leonard Fournette being on the trade block. They're hearing talks. They're ready to hear talks to try to get Leonard Fournette um, out of their room. So I mean, they went to the. A lot of people forget they went to the AFC Championship now just 4 years ago. That's not far for, especially a team in the NFL. Um, for example, like you have plenty of dynasties, like the Bills of the '90s, where they went to four straight Super Bowls. Like that's not a lot of time for an NFL team to lose such a great amount of players, but Jacksonville's just given up on a lot of those players. A lot of those players on that defense are gone, and we alluded to it when we were talking about pick nine with Derek Brown. Um, they gave up Calais Campbell. Yannick Ngakwe once out of there. They'd franchise tagged him, but he might be gone, especially if he only plays this year. He might only be here this year for the 2020 season, then be out in 2021 free agency. You don't know. And then AJ Bouye just left. They got rid of him. They let him go. And Jalen Ramsey they traded away for this pick. So in my eyes, you get somebody like Christian Fulton. He's only 6 feet tall, but at the combine he ran a 4.46. He's quick. His vertical jump was 35 and a half, so he's tall. He's tall when he can get up and go defend a ball when he needs to be. And again, he played in like we were talking about with Henderson and McKinney. Like we have three defensive backs at 18 through 20 here, all from the SEC, all three different SEC schools, and this is why we keep talking about it and keep alluding to it is because an SEC defensive back is so crucial here, and I think that it just shows again like the SEC powerhouse that they have. Um, and again, I think it just felt again this was another one where we knew the Jags had to go defensive back here because they don't really have anybody else on their defense that can cover because Bouye and Ramsey are gone, so they have to fill this void here at pick number 20.
Yeah, this pick just made too much sense. Fulton comes from what is proclaimed by many as DBU. There's a lot of moves that potentially could be made that affects this pick. Supposedly Jamal Adams of the Jets is on the trade block. He could make a difference. Again, we have Derek Brown going at number 9 to the Jaguars. But in my mind, and Jordan shared the same thought, they have to bounce back from trading Jalen Ramsey. You have to get into a full blown rebuild, and you can argue again, maybe going with an offensive piece, especially if Leonard Fournette were to go get traded, maybe getting the running back of the future right here and helping out Gardner Minshew, maybe another wide receiver, but you really don't need it. So therefore, Christian Fulton comes in and makes a lot of sense. To the next pick, we head to Minnesota. Minnesota, a wild card team, but they get this pick from the Buffalo Bills, who traded away who got Stephon Diggs from the Vikings. So with this pick, Jordan and I have T. Higgins, wide receiver out of Clemson, and there is not enough praise for this young man. He played for 3 years at Clemson, so he will lead as a junior, 6'4", 215 pounds. This past season, 59 catches, 1,100 yards, 13 touchdowns, averaged 20 yards a catch, which is insane. He's had 27 touchdowns over his career. He's had Trevor Lawrence throwing to him for the past 2 years, and he just looks fantastic. Big playability, good speed. He's a guy that can easily open up the passing game for the Vikings. Take a little bit of pressure off of Adam Thielen. It's the Vikings. I wouldn't say are in a rebuild, but they needed to move on from Stephon Diggs. T. Higgins comes in, fills the hole right away. He's a fast receiver. He's a good hands receiver. Reminds me a lot of Stephon Diggs. But at 6'4", 215, you can't really beat that. He's the best receiver on the board at this point, and he fills an immediate need for the Minnesota Vikings.
This is the Eagles, by the way, at 21.
Oh, this is the Eagles?
The Eagles, yeah.
Well, oops.
You make mistakes. Again, this is why we're a work in progress, all right? Is how we got the name. We were saying it so much, but yeah, I think you got to the
Oh, I looked right over.
yeah.
Okay, my bad. Well, I covered the Vikings at 22. um, I
But
mean, again, you can't really go wrong with the pick at 22, but at 21, is where T. Higgins actually ends up falling. We had the Vikings taking another wide receiver. Um, but T. Higgins right away fills a need for Philadelphia too. Philadelphia and Minnesota are very much so one and the same. They have that one good receiver each. So Thielen at the Vikings, and with Philadelphia, you got Alshon Jeffrey. But the problem with Philadelphia wide receivers is that they're always injured.
mhm.
Um, Therefore, give Carson Wentz, T. Higgins to throw to. You got Miles Sanders, Zach Ertz is still over there on Philadelphia's squad. And T. Higgins comes in. He's fast. He's a reliable guy. He's sure-handed. Best receiver on the board. Again, I don't know how I skipped over the Philadelphia Eagles. Um, it might just be that I'm a Steelers fan and I refuse to see Philly on that roster. But anyway, T. Higgins is going to be solid. I don't know what else there really is to say about the guy, because I think he proved everything that he needed to in college.
Mm. I think so too. Like you said too, you hit it on the head. Just being at Clemson, having Trevor Lawrence throw the ball to you every year under Dabo's system. Clemson's he's been the top guy at Clemson for as a wide receiver for 2 3 years now. Um, it's finally his time to shine. It's crazy that we're talking about T. Higgins this far down because again, you speculate before going into this season that T. Higgins was going to be the top one or two wide receiver off the board, but I mean we have Henry Ruggs going before him, CeeDee Lamb, and Jerry Jeudy. So he's the fourth wide receiver off our board. Um, So that just gives you an idea about how deep this wide receiver class is crazy to think about. Um, in our opinion, too, that we talked about when we got this far, when we were talking about it, it's crazy how far we're going down, and seeing the deep wide receiver class that the plethora um, that's presented in this class. So now with the actual Minnesota Vikings pick,
Are you sure?
22. 21, the Eagles had T. Higgins, wide receiver, Clemson. At 22, we have the Vikings taking their receiver and Justin Jefferson out of LSU. Um, we again, this I'm personally getting a lot of picks that we really didn't have to debate a lot on. Um, Justin Jefferson would be great alongside Adam Thielen on the other side of the field of him. Um, he was again. That's they just lost Stephon Diggs. This is their pick from the Bills, and they replaced Stephon Diggs right here with him with Justin Jefferson, who can be a cheaper option and be less of a locker room problem than I think Stephon Diggs was becoming. Um, like I alluded, my brother's a big Minnesota fan, so he was saying like he doesn't want to go, and then I his Instagram he said something on his Instagram, and I think a day or two later he was gone, and I was like, dude, I tried telling you, I tried telling you, he wants out. He took all of his pictures of him in Minnesota gear and off of his Instagram before he got traded, so we kind of alluded to it before, but yeah, I think ESPN's Instagram's had it on there a couple times. Justin Jefferson's juke against Clemson, which was insane. He juked out like three or four guys. Um, he's got great speed. He's a tall receiver that can go. Again, it just it's great for Adam Thielen because it takes attention off of Adam Thielen, which is what Stephon Diggs is great at. And I don't think Stephon Diggs realized is what he actually did really well. And I think Stephon Diggs really wanted to be that number one guy in Minnesota, but he's just not. And Adam Thielen's the number one guy in my eyes, and I think Justin Jefferson can complement Adam Thielen really well on Minnesota's offense. Zach?
Oh, right. Sorry, my mic decided to mute itself.
You're
Um,
good.
Justin Jefferson here is a great pick. And I mean, I kind of said it when I thought T. Higgins was going here because on my original mock draft, I had T. Higgins going to the Vikings. But Jefferson's the same way. He's a big bodied receiver who thrived with Joe Burrow throwing to him. And Kirk Cousins kind of has that same mold as Joe Burrow. He's a strong arm quarterback, can launch the ball down the field. And the nice thing with Jefferson is he doesn't have to be the number one receiver. You can line him up in the slot, or you can put Thielen in the slot. Justin Jefferson is just an instantly playable guy who's going to create a lot of matchup problems in the NFC North.
Hmm.
And I guess that leads us on to pick number 23. Now, this one is hot take, but I really, really like this pick. At pick number 23, the New England Patriots select Kenneth Murray, a linebacker out of Oklahoma. Now, there there is a lot of drama in New England, mainly the fact that Tom Brady just walked out. And there's the question of, well, is Stidham our guy? I mean, Jordan Love's still on the board, Jacob Eason's on the board, Jalen Hurts is on the board. Do we maybe go after somebody like that? Um, but I look and I see a guy like Kenneth Murray, and this Patriots defense is still very, very, very scary. And you can get a guy like Kenneth Murray who thrived in Oklahoma. He's a sideline to sideline thumper. Murray can instantly make a difference on that front. After losing Kyle Van Noy, Dante Hightower is getting up there in age. Jamie Collins left. So you got a huge hole at linebacker, and you're going to take him right here before, the Saints get up, the Ravens get up here. You get a great pick here by Kenneth Murray, who's young. He can be the quarterback of that defense, and it's just a phenomenal pick. I don't see any reason why Kenneth Murray gets passed on here.
Hmm. Yeah, like Zach alluded to too, that was my main concern with New England is they just lost a couple of linebackers that they had. Jamie Collins just went to Detroit, and Kyle Van Noy went across the division to Miami. So their big hole that they have on that defense is linebacker. And if you're going to have a decent defense, again consistently to help out your young quarterback that you're probably going to start in Jarrett Stidham, or a not really consistent and older quarterback like Brian Hoyer. If you're going to roll that way, then you got to have a good defense that can maybe win you a couple of games, maybe win you 7 or 8 games to rely on your defense. Like again, Tom Brady wasn't fantastic like in lights out last year. Their defense won them plenty of games last year. And I think if they can get somebody like Kenneth Murray who can start in there in that defense and get into that great defense and learn from some of those veterans like the McCourtys, Stephon Gilmore, and a couple of their players on D line, in Dante Hightower, who can 100% help him out being at his position, I think that would be great for the Patriots right there. Um, at number 24, Zach alluded to it the last time. We have another hot take. We have at number 24, Mr. Jordan Love, quarterback out of Utah State. Yes, he is here. we have him here. So um, we both we both had differentiating players. I had actually Kenneth Murray falling right here. I thought Kenneth Murray would have fit great with the Saints, but after Kenneth Murray was gone, Zach and I both kind of talked ourselves into it, and we were like, I actually really like Jordan Love right here. Um, you sit under Drew Brees, one of the most consistent quarterbacks of all time, if not the most consistent quarterback. He's broken records. He broke a record last year. He's also getting up there in age. He's 38, 39 now. He doesn't have a lot of years left under his belt. Um,
I think he's 40.
He's like four. As I say, I was thinking too. I was like, well, maybe he is 40, but I mean, still, unless you're Tom Brady and playing at
He's
41,
41.
he's
Drew Brees is
41.
41 years old.
Yeah, I mean, look at that. I mean, he only has, I think he only has a year or two left on his contract, right?
He signed a 2-year extension this past offseason.
Okay, so I mean, still, if you're gonna sit under Drew Brees for a couple years, it's a great person to sit under and learn, as well as Sean Payton, one of the greatest offensive minds in the industry right now in the league. So if you're going to sit under somebody um, like a team like the Saints, it'd be great to sit under somebody like Tom Brady, not Tom Brady, excuse me, Sean Payton and Drew Brees. And you already have a great running back in Alvin Kamara. You have a dynamic playmaker, one of the best receivers in the league on offense, and Michael Thomas. And now you have Emmanuel Sanders. The offense is already scary. And for years to come, if you keep some of those playmakers on that offense, Jordan Love can come in there and just dominate on that offense again. So um, they're kind of doing, I think, Zach actually alluded to it earlier. Surprisingly, not me being a Packers fan. They're pulling a Packers from 2005, having Jordan Love slide this far and getting their quarterback of the future and having him sit for a couple years like they did with Aaron Rodgers. And again, if I'm being completely honest, that's something I'm completely happy with because Aaron Rodgers is my quarterback. So um, what we talked about with Jordan Love too is he is at Utah State, and that's the thing. But still, like he's not playing at a Power Five school like your Oklahoma, LSU, Ohio State. He's playing at Utah State, so his consistency has been an issue in some people's eyes. But again, he's playing at Utah State. He doesn't have the top caliber receivers. He doesn't have the top caliber O line to protect him or the running back to help him out of the backfield. Um, and some of the interceptions was because he was trying to do too much. He was the best player on the field on that offense, and maybe probably the defense. He was trying to do too much on the field, and that's what I think people also kind of allude to when they're talking about Jordan Love too, is that he was trying to do too much. So maybe in the system like the Saints, he can get put into that system that Sean Payton has implemented and done so well for how many years with the Saints, and can get put in there and thrive and not have to try to do so much, um, and lean back and actually just be their quarterback of the future.
Yeah, I agree. Jordan Love had a better sophomore season than he did as a junior. As a sophomore, he threw for 3,500 yards, 32 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. And then as a junior, he threw for 3,400 yards, 20 touchdowns, and 17 interceptions. And again, you can argue that a lot of those weren't his fault, but he did try to do too much. And that's where a team like the Saints are gonna have, nothing but fire in their eyes seeing a guy like this. He's 6'4", 225, Bakersfield, California native. And the nice thing with him is that he's a guy that doesn't have to start right away. Taysom Hill is the only other quarterback on the roster, but Taysom Hill is too impactful to that Saints offense as a playmaker, punt returner, whatever it is you can put him in at. And on top of that, Taysom Hill is a little up there in age, whereas you've got a guy straight out of college that can make a difference right away. Jordan Love falling here is an ideal scenario for the New Orleans Saints because there's not really a lot of needs on this Saints team. Um, Going into the offseason, my biggest one is getting a receiver opposite of Michael Thomas, and you did that with Emmanuel Sanders. So I think Jordan Love is the easy pick here.
Mm-hmm.
That takes us to pick number 25. And at pick number 25, we have the Minnesota Vikings back on the clock. This is their true pick. And with this pick, we have them taking Trevon Diggs, cornerback out of Alabama. Trevon Diggs is big, 6'2", 207 pounds. He's a go-getter back there at corner. 20 solo tackles, 3 interceptions, 8 pass defenses. Reminds me a lot of Joe Hayden. Joe Hayden is a guy that you can easily have just go one-on-one. And Diggs has got a championship pedigree, which is why ultimately we had him go here instead of some of the other corners still on the board. Diggs is a senior, so he played for Nick Saban for 4 years. Um, and his numbers just continued to get better from 2018 to 2019. He can fly all around the field. He can go and score. He scored a touchdown defensively. He's a sideline to sideline guy. He can go play in the box. He can blitz. He can cover, zone, man coverage, whatever it is you need. Trevon Diggs has good hands. 3 interceptions last year, 4 in his career at Alabama. And being at Alabama, he consistently was going up against guys like in the national championship game. So Georgia, Clemson, the SEC has some solid wide receivers. And the Vikings, after Xavier Rhodes leaves, they get a guy like Trevon Diggs that can instantly come in here and fill a need on that Minnesota defense and keep them contending in the NFC North.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that makes their contention so much better. And like you said, they just lost Xavier Rhodes. They also lost on the other side of the field from Xavier Rhodes. They also lost Mackenzie Alexander. So it's kind of the same situation as the Jags of when we were talking about this too. I had a different corner taken here in my mock, but again, Zach and I were talking about this one, and we knew immediately it was going to be corner. Um, it was just a matter of which one. Even if they don't take Trayvon Diggs here, another corner that I had taken here is Jalen Johnson, corner from Utah. I've seen him taken here as well in a couple other different mocks. I've also seen Trayvon Diggs like we have taken here too. So I think a corner here is a great pick for the Vikings. They get a replacement for Xavier Rhodes and Mackenzie Alexander. Um, excuse me, after pick 25, we have the third and final pick for the Miami Dolphins. This is Houston's original pick, um, but the Laramie Tunsil trade has Miami picking in Houston's spot. And we have Miami taking running back out of Georgia, DeAndre Swift. This one is actually one pick that Zach and I were both up and down everywhere trying to figure out who we like better here. Um, we were both leaning toward the offensive side of the ball, and I had an offensive tackle taken here. Actually, that you see if you're looking at my screen here, I had an offensive tackle, Josh Jones, taken here. And I think right now we both kind of consensus picked DeAndre Swift because if you're going to bring Tua in, you got to have a running back playmaker. And I think we've alluded a couple times with the Finns already. They do have Jordan Howard now in their backfield, but Jordan Howard's more of a bruising type of back. He doesn't really catch the ball well. Um, and that's one thing that DeAndre Swift does very well. And he's great at catching the ball out of the backfield and running in space. And I think Zach and I alluded to that too. I think that's the main thing, is especially if you're going to have somebody like Tua. Even if he doesn't have the best offensive line, he can get the ball out quick if DeAndre Swift's coming out of the backfield and running. And I think that's why we have him taken here. Um, I could also see J.K. Dobbins here too. They're very close in their ranks. Some have Dobbins higher as the first running back off the board. Some people have DeAndre Swift as the first running back off the board. I think it's just more of a preference. And we think DeAndre Swift maybe has just a tad better of catching ability than J.K. Dobbins does, but they're both very, very similar. So I think it's just a little, maybe a little more preference as far as DeAndre Swift. But once we looked more into it, we really loved the DeAndre Swift pick here. He also didn't have DeAndre Swift actually in his mock either. The more we started talking about it, and the more we found that we needed a little more playmakers on this. Because last year, I mean, they got rid of Kenyon Drake. Kalen Ballage got hurt, so who they have Patrick Laird starting at running back. Like they don't have a lot of depth in the running back room, especially behind Jordan Howard now and Kalen Ballage. So that's why we consensus picked here with DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, the other really tough thing is when you have three first round picks is eventually you're gonna not have a need. Um, or I don't want to say not have a need because there's always a need on a team, but the biggest need right here is getting to us some playmakers. You've already got some number one receivers. You've got a guy like Tua right there, and give him a running back. Jordan and I both agree that potentially we see DeAndre Swift falling even into the second round. But the main thing that made us want to take him here is the fact that the Dolphins are going to get their chance to choose the running back that they want. Um, you get a guy who can replace Kenyon Drake. And ultimately lead your franchise for running. You saw the difference that Josh Jacobs made for John Gruden and the Raiders last year. So a guy like that now for this team would be huge.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings us to pick number 27. At pick number 27, this is where teams are usually pretty solid and they just need to go and get that one or two piece remaining. We have the Seattle Seahawks selecting Yetur Gross Matos, who is an edge rusher out of Penn State. Now, you might be sitting here, oh, Zach, Jordan, why are you doing that? Like, Jadeveon Clowney is still there. The main reason that we don't have Jadeveon Clowney and we have Gross Matos right here is that we're under the assumption that Jadeveon Clowney is leaving Seattle. At the time of this recording, he is a free agent. And at the time of this recording, we don't know where he's going yet. Seattle's still the favorite as of now. Um, but again, we don't know. So we may as well give the Seahawks somebody like Gross Matos who can come in and be a difference maker. Come right off the edge. And Gross Matos had a fantastic season, 9.5 sacks out of the Big Ten, and 24 solo tackles, 16 assists, 8 sacks last year in 2018. He's a guy who's just gotten better. 6'5", 264, great swim moves, and he can just get off the ball so fast. He's going to be a guy who is going to give Jimmy Garoppolo, Jared Goff, and Kyler Murray something to worry about. If Jadeveon Clowney comes back, obviously this pick could change. As I had them going after a safety with this pick to replace Am Chancellor.
Mm-hmm.
So as this pick is sitting here, I think you need more edge help than you do cornerback. So I have them taking Yetur Gross Matos.
I think so too. Like Zach alluded to too, with Jadeveon Clowney probably leaving and only franchise tag, he's still a free agent right now, and on a lot of people's free agent boards, he's the best free agent right now. But Seattle hasn't bitten in taking him back because maybe they think they're going to get somebody like Gross Matos here, or another edge rusher that can possibly happen here is Zach Bond if Gross Matos is taken. That's what we're thinking as far as what's going to happen. They get a cheaper option at edge rusher and Gross Matos, and somebody they can develop into a rusher of their future as well. Um, right now, we are going to go to the Baltimore Ravens, where Big Truss is housed. So, right now, at pick number 28, we are taking Patrick Queen, linebacker, LSU, is going to go to Baltimore. The main reason why I actually had Patrick Queen taken here in my mock, and the reason that Zach and I were kind of bantering back and forth and talking is, and the main reason it swayed both of us is just looking at their depth. I mean, he ran a 4.5 40, so he ran a decent 40 for a linebacker. He's big, he's strong. Um, the Ravens' linebackers right now are LJ Fort, Chris Board, and Jalen Ferguson. They just signed Jake Ryan today to help with the run stuffing and having some linebacker depth. But Jake Ryan also hasn't played a snap since 2017 when he left the pack before he had gotten injured in the 2018 season. Before week one of the 2018 season, before he got traded after that year. Sorry, bad wording. But he hasn't played a snap since the 2017 season for the Packers. So I definitely made that point too. A good linebacker, and even if he doesn't start in front of one of those linebackers, he immediately is depth, and he can come in as a role player and get reps off the bench. And he can roll around. Obviously, the Ravens are good enough to not need Patrick Queen if they don't need. Like Zach alluded to earlier too, like some of these latter picks right here are teams that really don't have much of a need. And they just need one or two of these skill players in these drafts to put them over the edge right here. Um, so getting somebody like Patrick Queen, I think, is vital to their success if they can get their second level, their defense better. Somebody that can be a commander in the middle of the field now. They don't have that Ray Lewis type person anymore, and I think ever since Ray Lewis had retired a couple years ago, I don't think they've really been the same, especially with Terrell Suggs leaving after last year. They don't really have that captain.
DJ Mosley as well.
Exactly. They don't have that commander anymore. So I think that Zach and I both 100% agree. Like they need that new commander on the second level of their defense. They have plenty of offensive playmakers right now. Um, I think Zach was more leaning toward offensive guard, offensive tackle hybrid, but he can banter with that. But I was more leaning toward the linebacker issue as well, just because you already have a lot of offensive playmakers right now. I think you need to focus on your defense because your offense is going to put plenty of points up on the board, but your defense has to keep the other opposing offenses off the field.
Yeah, let me input my banter here for a minute. Um, I I think that Marshall Yonda retiring is a bigger impact than people realize. When you have a guy on your offensive line that was a cornerstone for your team for so long, when they leave, it's usually pretty devastating. Look at Joe Thomas when he left the Browns. That Browns O line is still recovering. Um, but a guy like Marshall Yonda, he's been injured off and on, yeah, but they don't really have any depth at O line, and especially in a division where you have to go up against T.J. Watt and Myles Garrett twice a year, not to mention Carlos Dunlap, Bud Dupree, and whatever else everybody throws at you. You've got a lot of talent on that defensive side of the ball going against you to protect. You need for offense. However, Jordan is very right. Patrick Queen is a linebacker, side to side guy. I know I say that a lot, but that's some cool things about some of these linebackers that they're all sideline to sideline guys, and they can make a difference. You play in a division with Ben Roethlisberger, Baker Mayfield, and Joe Burrow. For how long Ben Roethlisberger is going to play, I'll allude to a little bit later. But Baker is solid. You got Joe Burrow who's going to come up and do some great things. Ben Roethlisberger can still sling the ball. He led the league in passing the last time he was healthy for a complete season. Um, you bring in a guy like Patrick Queen who can cover, he can tackle, and he can run. That's the cool thing with Patrick Queen. He's depth, but at the same time, he can start right away. Um, Inside, give LJ Fort a little bit of some time off, give Matthew Judon somebody to rely on, especially if Judon decides to walk away from Baltimore, as Baltimore just had to franchise tag him because they couldn't afford him. Um, But that's pretty much all Jordan and I will say about that pick from Baltimore. Baltimore has 2 or 3 holes that they could fill with this pick, but no offensive line is really jumping up and down on the board at this point. The best player on the board right now is Patrick Queen, so we have him going here. With our next pick, though, we have the Tennessee Titans selecting Ezra Cleveland, offensive guard, offensive tackle out of Boise State. Um, they lost some solid pieces. Um, they lost Jack Conklin and they lost Jarrell Casey. Um, those were the two big names that left their building. Um, and Jordan and I kind of sat around. We're like, which one was the bigger loss? That's the way that you have to look at this pick. Was Jarrell Casey getting traded away the bigger loss, or was it Conklin walking away? And I think, and he and I both kind of agreed it was Conklin. Enter in Ezra Cleveland, a guy who is kind of getting linked to the Cleveland Browns in this first round, who we have taking another offensive lineman earlier on. Ezra Cleveland is a guy who can come start right away. He's quick off the ball. He's got great footwork, great hands. The big thing with Cleveland is he's more of a developmental piece. So he's not exactly a guy who you would want to plug and play right away. But in my experience, he's a guy who can, you know, experience comes with playing time, and Ezra Cleveland I think is a guy who can play right away, give Derrick Henry some running lanes, pass protect for Tannehill, and if they don't feel he's ready to start right away, he can sit for the preseason and learn the playbook. But I think getting him in right away is the best way to do it. Again, great feet, great hands, great pass blocker, and I think he's a perfect fit for the Tennessee Titans.
Mhm. And like Zach alluded to earlier too, I think I originally had offensive tackle taken here too, but I wasn't sure which one. They have a couple of options, is what we were talking about. I had Josh Jones going 26 to the Finns, and I think what Zach, alluded to with Ezra Cleveland is he's a hybrid. He doesn't have to play offensive tackle. He could slot into offensive guard where there also could be a depth issue. Josh Jones is a big enough guy. He's he's I think too big to play tackle, so he's got to be a tackle, so he can't really hybrid around. And I think Ezra Cleveland can be quicker. And like Zach alluded to earlier too, we talked about the big Jack Conklin loss. If you're gonna have a bowling ball like Derrick Henry, who basically got you to the AFC Championship game last year, you got to have somebody who can block Derrick Henry, block for Derrick Henry, excuse me, not block Derrick Henry, but you get it, you know what I mean. But but somebody like this, who's big and strong and can block for Derrick Henry, is going to have to be crucial in for that offensive line for the Tennessee Titans. So, Zach, if I go on too long, you got to tell me.
I got you, man. I got you. This pick, in case you haven't guessed, is the Green Bay Packers, which is Jordan's team. I'm gonna sincerely let Jordan say everything about this one, so you're not gonna hear my voice until I say what the 31st pick is to the Niners. But I got you, man. Go ahead and take your baby and run with it.
For sure. All right, for the 30th pick in the NFL mock draft 1.0 by a work in progress, we have the Green Bay Packers selecting Denzel Mims, wide receiver out of Baylor. Um, we were actually surprisingly bantering back and forth between this pick here for the Packers. In my original mock, I had Laviska Shenault Jr. Um, and one thing that Zach actually pointed out that I really like is Denzel Mims is about an inch and a half taller, and he's a lot more consistent than Chenault Jr. is. And in my original mock, I had Denzel Mims going 22 to the Vikings. In my original mock, and I think at 30, if he's available, I think the Packers should definitely take best wide receiver available. Um, in my opinion, I mean, you have at on Green Bay's wide receiver depth chart, you have Devontae Adams, and before they got signed Devin Funchess, who do they have? On Madden, nobody rated probably above 75. So maybe Marquez Valdez-Scantling, but he's an apparent deep ball threat. Um, but Zach also just let me know Chenault also had a core muscle injury. So I mean, you get somebody like Denzel Mims who does not miss a game at Baylor. Um, I don't watch Baylor a lot, but when I did watch Baylor, I saw him getting the ball, and you could just hear a commentator say, "Wow, look at Mims," and you look at his profile, his chart, he's big. His main issue that I've seen from everybody is route running. But who is in that locker room and can probably be the locker right next to him? Devontae freaking Adams, who's a top three receiver in the league at running routes. That dude can teach him so much coming into the Packers and being a rookie. Devontae Adams can be his mentor. He also has probably one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game, also known as Baby Goat Aaron Rodgers. So um, you have you have one of the best quarterbacks in the game that can help you learn. Um, and in a great football franchise like the Packers, I'm not just saying that because I'm a Packers fan. I love my Packers, but I am saying that because they are regarded as one of the best franchises of all time. They know what they're doing. If they get their guy here at 30, you can already step up your wide receiver core wholeheartedly right here. You have Devonte Adams, Devin Funchess, and Denzel Mims as your starting wideouts. Um, Another problem that I need the Packers to address eventually, and if they don't do it in free agency, maybe they go third round and get him, but a tight end, dude. Jimmy Graham leaving in free agency, I think was a great play because he was a cap hold. He cost us 8 million in cap. Get that guy, ah, get him out. That guy, ah, and then all we have right now at tight end is Mercedes Lewis, which is mainly a run blocker tight end, which is I still think great to have on our team. But Jay Sternberger, who really didn't show up and was hurt for most of the year last year, and he's only going to be a second year player. So getting a tight end maybe in free agency, I was kind of hoping for Eric Ebron or Austin Hooper, but Zach's team was a duty head and got Eric Ebron. So that's why Zach sucks. Anyway, anyway,
Wow.
anyway, I think Denzel Mims is a good pick here if he's available. Um, I've seen a couple of different mocks where Laviska Shenault is linked here, and I've seen a couple of mocks to where Brandon Ayuk is here. Ayuk, I think, would be interesting because Devin Funchess is more of a bigger guy and can be a red zone threat down the field, and Devontae Adams is your big play receiver every down. And Brandon Ayuk or Laviska Shenault can be in your slot and be your middle of the field yak players, which is what they specialize in. So I think you go value here, and we go Denzel Mims for Green Bay. Um, I think he'll fit in well. Again, like I said, if they go through your wide receiver set, I think you put Mims in there too. If you're wanting a bigger wide receiver instead of Mims, you'd put Alan Lazard in, which I think Alan Lazard is one of the most underrated receivers that still really haven't came out of his shell yet. So I think you give him some time, and I think that you need. Sorry. I think you give Alan Lazard time to be a red zone threat as well as Denzel Mims in the future for the Packers wide receiver core.
Yeah, I pretty much have nothing else to say. I know you could talk for hours on this
Yeah,
pick.
I
Um, so we're just gonna go ahead and move on. With the 31st pick in the NFL draft, the San Francisco 49ers select Grant Delpit, safety out of LSU. Um, Now this I have to say, I think Delpit goes much earlier than this.
mhm.
Um, Jordan and I just had to kind of come up with where to put him. Delpit is just a phenomenal safety. He's the best safety in this draft. Um, we have Xavier McKinney already taken much earlier. Um, Going to the Dolphins. Xavier McKinney's really solid, but if you want a stats guy, Grant Delpit's your guy. This 2019 season alone. 38 solo tackles, one forced fumble, two interceptions, seven passes defended. 2018, 46 solo tackles, five sacks, a fumble, five interceptions, you know, Grant Delpit is a stud, 6'3", 203 pounds out of Houston, Texas. Played a great year with the LSU Tigers. Um, if he falls this far, he's a lot of a Derwin James type guy. Where the Chargers a couple years back just sat and waited, and the best player on the board was Grant Delpit. So I think if the 49ers can get a guy like him, he immediately shores up that secondary, and the 49ers become super, super hard to beat. I don't see any reason you don't take the best player on the board at this point in time. Um, if Grant Delpit's here, I think looking back on it, that Delpit goes a lot earlier, but obviously we will go ahead and wait and see. But for all intents and purposes, this is where he stays.
Mhm. And like I said, I on my board, he was 100% the best player, and he's been the best player for a couple of picks now, going back to like 25, 26. He's been the best player. He's projected 19 on the top players in the whole draft, and somebody especially like as good as the 49ers are going to get him at 31 in our draft, which is so scary for a Niners defense that was already dominant last year. They lost to Forrest Buckner, but they kept just about everybody else on that defense. So getting some safety depth, if you want to go with the nickel set on your defense and you want to put another D back there, somebody that's got the football IQ and the smarts that Grant Delpit has, and like Zach said, if you're a stats guy, somebody like Grant Delpit would be perfect for the Niners to get alongside Jimmy Ward and Jaquiski Tart, who was one of the greatest names I've ever heard. But anyway, uh,
And the other scary thing with this, before we move on, this is a team now that has Javon Kinlaw and Grant Delpit in the first round. That's a scary combo.
scary. That's scary for a Niners. Again, that's scary for a Niners defense that was already as good as they were last year. You get two young players that can step in, and if not start, be right in the rotation to Robert Saleh's defense. Which how he is again. I think I talked about it earlier. How that dude did not get hired as a head coach this past season is beyond me for the job he did with that young defense. He should get hired 100% here in the next couple seasons. But going past the Niners here, the very last pick in the first round of the 2020 NFL mock draft is going to be the Kansas City Chiefs, and we have them taking Zach Bond, linebacker or edge rusher from Wisconsin. And Zach Bond, um, we were kind of looking at a couple different players here when we were going through the Chiefs, and for the Chiefs we saw running back. We see interior line as maybe an issue to protect Patty Mahomes and to protect their running backs, or we saw running back. And again, it was kind of a Miami issue to where um, Miami at 26 and the Ravens at 28 to see which was a bigger issue, and the Titans at 29 with D line or O line being more of an issue. And I think with the Chiefs, I think we saw more of a linebacker edge rush issue here. At running back, you still have not Damian Jones, excuse me. You have Damian Williams. At defensive line, you had Chris Jones, who just left, and now you bring in Zach Bond, who's a hybrid linebacker or edge rusher and can come off the edge or play in coverage, play in the second level of the defense, whatever you want him to do. He has a great football IQ. He runs sideline to sideline. He can make any tackle you want. There's a couple of issues I think with his feet that we were reading a little bit when we were going through the draft. There was just a couple of issues with his length and his feet, but again, you're going into a Chiefs defense that was struggling with the run a little bit last year, and I think you put Zach Bond in like that, and you can immediately stop that rush issue. And they kind of addressed that toward the latter part of the season. Um, my Packers got to throttle the Chiefs on the running side of the ball. Aaron Jones had a monster game against the Chiefs, but that's my pack anyway. That's on me, on my off my soapbox. But um, Zach Bond, I think the more we talked about it and the more that I kind of brought it up and said, how about somebody like Zach Bond? If you're going to get an edge rusher like that can get pressure on a quarterback, they don't really have anybody glaring on the edge rushing side of the ball, edge rushing side of the field on the first level of their defense. And I think we both kind of talked ourselves into that pick too.
Yeah, Zach Bond is the type of guy who could also go a lot earlier. CBS Sports compares him a lot to TJ Watt. He's a guy who can fit anywhere, but he's got to be in the right system to succeed. And that's where he really comes into play. Um, Zach Bond isn't exactly a necessary thing, but he's the right move here for the Kansas City Chiefs. Again, there's a lot of places they could go with this pick. I could see them straight up trading out of it. But they need to add another impact player on the defense,
Mhm.
and Jordan and I both see them doing this in Zach Bond.
Yeah, yeah, and with that, that concludes our 2020 NFL mock draft 1.0. The only mock draft we're probably going to have because we're kind of counting down the days here, and not probably a lot's going to change within 5 days of the draft. But now we get to do a little more analysis, if you believe it or not. We're going to do a little bit of analysis on some players that probably should have been drafted in round one, players that kind of got snubbed out of round one. Um, and then for teams that doesn't have a first round pick, what do some of those teams need to address as we get into round two as quickly as possible? So I'll let Zach go on a couple of players he thinks kind of fell out of his mock drafts in his first round that can be easily early second round picks.
So, some guys who fell out of the first round for me that could either be first rounders, maybe early or mid second rounders. First of all, Josh Jones, offensive lineman out of Houston. I'm not going to go too much into some of these players. I'm pretty much just going to say the reason why that they didn't go in the first. Josh Jones is a big developmental player. Um, he has the intangibles to be a solid O lineman in the NFL, but he's got to be developed. And other than the Baltimore Ravens towards the back end of that first round, there's no team really that is going to need to take the time to groom an offensive lineman. So Josh Jones is more of a later pick. Maybe somebody like the Pittsburgh Steelers with an old offensive line, Baltimore later, the Titans, the Packers, New England, teams with some older offensive linemen that are looking more to develop for the future. Secondly, Neville Gallimore, defensive lineman out of Oklahoma. The main reason he is not slated in this first round is purely just where he lines up to play. He's a defensive lineman. If he were an end or an edge rusher, he'd be off the board, but he's more of a nose tackle. Um, so you maybe want to go get a guy like Gallimore if you're a team that likes that 3-4 type offense, or maybe even a 4-3 if that's the way you want to go. But I think Gallimore is going to thrive more in a 3-4, where he can line up as an end, or he could go play nose tackle. Um, so you got guys like the 49ers, who I could see using in the Steelers after Javon Hargrave left in free agency. The Bengals, perhaps, with an aging Geno Atkins. The Detroit Lions, maybe after moving on from Damon Snacks Harrison. Um, that's a guy who I could definitely see going there. Terrell Lewis, edge rusher out of Alabama, I could also see going in the first round. The reason he's not in there is the off the field concerns. We've seen players who have had off the field concerns come into the NFL, get clean, and play really well, and then we've seen guys who have had problems off the field that just haven't been able to keep them off the field. Terrell Lewis is that guy. He's had some injury problems, but when he's played, he has been fantastic for Alabama. Laviska Shenault, as Jordan mentioned, did have a core injury. They're saying that he'll be okay to play, but we'll see. You're never the same after a big injury. Jalen Rigor, wide receiver, TCU. There's just a lot of wide receivers. He's a good wide receiver. He's a lot like KJ Hamler. He could go in the first round, but due to the depth, teams might wait on him. And of course, the last thing that I'll touch on before we go back and we debate some of these other teams, it's the running backs. J.K. Dobbins, Jonathan Taylor, those types of guys, they're definite first round talents, but it's because they play running back. Running backs are not exactly getting all the love in the world right now. So guys like that are going to fall. So look for teams like the Pittsburgh Steelers, especially who have been keyed into a lot of these running backs. Um, get some eyes on a potential runner. Tampa Bay, Chicago, Jacksonville if they move on from Leonard Fournette. Tennessee maybe to get somebody behind Derrick Henry. Um, maybe look for a Baltimore to get somebody next to Mark Ingram and make that backfield even scarier. Um, maybe Buffalo to back up Devin Singletary and get a nice 1-2 punch.
Mhm. And Zach actually kind of touched on a couple players that I had, especially somebody like Josh Jones. I thought Josh Jones immediately was going to be the third or fourth offensive tackle on the board, and I thought he slid enough going down to 26 for the Finns. But again, Zach and I don't have him in our first round. I think he's a big presence to have. And like Zach alluded to, maybe the Bengals get him first pick in at 33 if he's there and available. Somebody to guard their new quarterback. If, I know they have offensive tackle issues. Um, Somebody like Josh Jones right there is still sitting there. He'd be a good guy to block for Joe Burrow and Joe Mixon coming out of the backfield, as well as Giovanni Bernard. Another guy that I had possibly going as another offensive tackle is Isaiah Wilson. I had him going to the Titans at number 29. Um, Still, I think it's kind of the same thing there too. Somebody early like the Bengals or even the Skins. Somebody because the Skins are getting rid of Trent Williams, I'm pretty sure. So somebody like Josh Jones or Isaiah Wilson could easily go one or two to the Bengals and the Skins right there. The Lions I could see taking offensive line. The Giants we have addressing their offensive line with Tristan Wirfs and maybe the Finns again, maybe because they're right behind them. Maybe the Finns go right there um, at 39 with that pick. So you don't know. 37. I'm sorry, not 39. At 37, we have them maybe getting an offensive tackle. And Zach alluded to it too with the Visca Chenault. That's who I originally had going to the Packers. Laviska Chenault, wide receivers like that should be going definitely throughout the second round. Laviska Chenault, Jalen Rieger, um, Brandon Ayuk, and KJ Hamler, I think, is probably going to go later second or early third. Those are some of the wide receivers on the board that may have been projected to go up here toward the latter first round. And then J.K. Dobbins, I had at number 32, as well as Jonathan Taylor, two running backs that I've seen in different mocks and different people's mock drafts that they like. J.K. Dobbins and Jonathan Taylor are immediately two backs. Depending on what you want in your system, maybe Jonathan Taylor could go to the Panthers at number 39 to back up Christian McCaffrey. So you have a bruiser back and you have a do anything back in your backfield. Um, or like Zach had said before, maybe he goes to the Chargers. If you'd want him to back up, that's kind of the same thing as the Panthers. Austin Eckler is a very good receiving back. He can also run, but if you'd want a more true bruiser back, you can go Jonathan Taylor to the Chargers. Another player that Zach I don't think really mentioned there that he had in his first round mock was AJ Terrell, the corner out of Clemson. Um, I think that's the best corner that's left on the board right now, as well as Jeff Gladney from TCU. Those are some of the players that I think are going to go quickly here in the second round after this first round mock. So from picks 33 to probably 50, those are some of the players I expect to see. But yeah, so now uh, just quickly, we're going to go through some of the team needs that these teams that did not get to pick in the first round need to quickly address in the second round. So Zach and I will each kind of take turns bantering back and forth between some of these teams. The teams that did not pick in the first round were Chicago, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, the LA Rams, Houston, and Indianapolis. So, Zach, who do you think Chicago needs to address to get in their second round pick?
Well, with Chicago, there's a couple big needs. But I think their first pick in this round needs to be at the wide receiver position. Um, Mitch Trubisky got a lot of help as a rookie, just based on the players around him and on the defensive side of the ball. I 100% believe that they need to get more playmakers for that offense because the only big playmaker that stands out for me is running back Tariq Cohen. Um, so maybe a guy like KJ Hamler, a guy like Laviska Shenault, um, like one of these types of guys, Jalen Rigor. Go give Mitch Trubisky a target, and if you do that, I think that's going to be the best way to go about it. I think they need to go wide receiver with their first pick in the second round.
Hmm. I think so too. I think the wide receiver would be a good pick there. They have Allen Robinson. They still, I think, have Anthony Miller, but um, that's a possibility. But again, like you have Allen Robinson, you have Tariq Cohen, who's not really a downfield back. That's more of David Montgomery style. But yeah, I think so. I agree too. I think, especially with how deep this class is, somebody that could fall that far to the Bears. Um, is somebody like your Laviska Shenault, Brandon Ayuk. If you're wanting somebody that's smaller and quicker, I'd go Brandon Ayuk or Jalen Rieger, KJ Hamler. Some of these smaller receivers are going to fall in perfectly, I think, for Chicago if that falls. Um, and next, we kind of have the Buffalo Bills here. Zach kind of alluded to it a little bit ago with Devin Singletary, with one of these backs maybe going there. If they're not 100% confident with Devin Singletary, I think Buffalo had a great pickup with Stephon Diggs. I would 100% trade pick 22 away to get Stephon Diggs. I think Stephon Diggs is well worth it. I think you needed a weapon there for Stephon Diggs to have. Not Stephon Diggs, excuse me, Josh Allen. Um, I think Cole Beasley, John Brown, somebody quick down the field, and then you have your number one now. That's a consistent veteran on that wide receiver core. I really wasn't sold on their receiver core last year. I again, that's one thing that I kind of saw with Josh Allen. I was like, he has a downfield threat in John Brown. I liked the Cole Beasley slot receiver kind of pickup, but I wasn't really sold on your most basic receiver that you have. So you have that in Stephon Diggs now, which is I think a great pickup. And I think personally, Buffalo's defense doesn't need a lot of help. My problem I see is Buffalo's offensive line. They don't have a lot of stars on their offensive line. They don't check a lot of marks on their offensive line on how good they block. Josh Allen had to learn how to run a lot. Josh Allen was mainly a pocket passer when he was at Wyoming, and Josh Allen had to learn how to run. Josh Allen's now one of the better running quarterbacks in the league, which is also very versatile and very nice to have if you're Sean McDermott. But also sometimes you want to let Josh Allen get out, not have to get out of the pocket and bomb the ball down the field, which is why Buffalo got him in the first place because of his arm. So again, I kind of alluded to it before. Maybe somebody like a Josh Jones or an Isaiah Wilson, an offensive tackle. Cesar Ruiz, if he's still there and he's sliding, he's probably one of the better interior linemen on this board that we didn't even talk about from 1 to 32 to 35 ish range. He could be available there for an interior center guard combo that you could have with him. So I think that's what I think Buffalo needs to address for their first pick as offensive line.
So I kind of disagree with you. Like I really really disagree with you.
Okay.
Um Josh Allen's rookie season, he did not have an O-line. And then last year they went and they got him one. Um my biggest concern for this Baltimore team, um they kind of addressed already with wide receiver by getting Stephon Diggs. So you got Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, John Brown now. Dawson Knox in his second year is going to have some time to develop. But I think one of the needs on this team is running back, but it's not the biggest need. I think corner is. You've got Tre'Davious White at corner. Tre'Davious White, the premier shutdown corner in the NFL. I think you need to go get a guy on the other side, maybe like an AJ Terrell who's still on this board, to help shut down some of these big time receivers. The Bills are my favorite to win the East in the AFC,
Yep.
but you know, I look back at this game. Look at the Bills versus the Steelers. when they played last year, and the Bills won by a touchdown over the Steelers. But they beat the Steelers with a second and third string quarterback by a touchdown. You put Big Ben back out there on that field, and that game's a lot tougher that you're not going to win by a touchdown. Um, I 100% think that corner has to be a big need here. They put a lot of money into that defense with uh, with Edmonds. You've got Tre'Davious White, as I mentioned. It's a young defense. Ed Oliver in his second year is going to be fantastic. So maybe going and getting another edge rusher or some secondary help. I think you got to focus on the secondary. And if Terrell is still there for Baltimore in the second round, I think you take him.
I like that take too. I don't mind that take. I think I definitely agree with you that it's improved, but again, you could still see Josh Allen scrambling around enough, and Josh Allen had a fumbling problem his first year. I think it got a little bit better last year, but especially I think Devin Singletary's the guy. I think Devin Singletary is definitely a good back for them. Um, but I could also see the corner being taken there too, like you said, AJ Terrell, Jeff Gladney from TCU is still there. If one of those guys end up falling to their pick, which would be 54, which is their first pick um, in the second round of this draft. Um, I think you highly consider either of those positions, just because, like you said too, you have Tre'Davious White, who, again, like you said, is one of the best shutdown corners in the league, along with probably Stephon Gilmore and Darius Slay. But yeah, I think that um, corner is a need. I still think even if you're not getting a starter on the O line, I wasn't saying like a starter. I think some depth would be good for them too, just in case somebody gets hurt. Because like you said, I think they did address the issue. I think it did get a little bit better last year, but I still think a bit of an issue is the O line, and Josh Allen having to run around a lot. Josh Allen, I think their offense would be a lot better if Josh Allen got to actually pocket pass a little bit more because they bettered their receiving core a lot better this year. But so now, I will let you do what you did with me. I'll just let you talk. I won't say anything. We have gotten to the Pittsburgh Steelers on my list here. Um, I'll let you do what I did with me. I'll just sit here and shut up. I got to talk about the Packers for probably 5 minutes, so I'll let you talk about what Pittsburgh needs to do with their first pick in the draft, in the second round of this draft.
Okay, so with Pittsburgh, there's a couple of needs. Some of them bigger than others, of course. Um, the notable Steelers free agent signings, franchise tagging Bud Dupree saves. The Steelers needed to go get an edge rusher right away. Steven Wisniewski is more depth at O line, so O line is excuse me, a little bit of the hiccups. Definitely O line is one of the bigger needs for this team, especially with Ramon Foster retiring, Marquise Pouncey, Alejandro Villanueva. They're getting up there in age. David Castro is going into his age 30 season. He's still pretty good, so you don't really need to worry about right guard. But you kind of need to start worrying about the rest of your interior line. So maybe like Cesar Ruiz out of Michigan. A lot of people are throwing around offensive help. The Steelers got Eric Ebron in free agency, as Jordan kind of got mad at me about earlier. You have a wide receiver core of Juju Smith-Schuster, James Washington, Deontay Johnson, Deion Kane. The big thing that the Steelers need is depth. Deontay Johnson looked fantastic. Juju he had some injury problems last year, as well as the fact that he didn't have a solid quarterback throwing to him. James Washington had a great step forward this year, but can he continue? So receiver is probably a big need. Nose tackle is huge. Neville Gallimore could be a huge pickup here if he falls to the Steelers in the second round. With Javon Hargrave leaving, you need a guy who's going to go plug up the middle, open things up for TJ Watt, Bud Dupree, Cam Hayward, Stephon Tuitt. The one pick here that the one of the needs that I do agree with is quarterback. And I'm going to use my last little bit of time on this. Quarterback is a need for the Steelers. Mason Rudolph is a quality backup. I don't think he's the starter of the future. And Devlin Hodges showed flashes of something. He could be something, but I don't see that either. The last time the Steelers used a pick in the first or second round for a quarterback was back in '04 when they took Ben Roethlisberger out of Miami, Ohio, and he's going to be a future Hall of Famer. The Steelers, maybe a guy like Jalen Hurts has been pegged to the Steelers a lot lately with the 49th overall pick. So maybe seeing him there would be a good play for the Steelers. So overall, I think it's one of three positions. I think either A, if Cesar Ruiz is sitting there at 49, you go and you grab him, a guy who's played center and guard, so he can come in and back up Marquise Pouncey, who's getting up there in age. He can potentially go and plug and play and replace Ramon Foster right away. Um, it's or he can even sit and learn for a year behind whoever it is they move into interior line. Although I think Steven Wisniewski, as well as Matt Filer and Zach Banner are going to do fine in Pittsburgh at O line. The second need quarterback Jalen Hurts. Mel Kiper, an ESPN/NFL analyst, has kind of pegged Hurts to the Steelers. I could see that just a bit. I don't think it's a position that needs to be reached for right away. Um, if if he's there, I think you take a serious look, and it depends on do you think Roethlisberger is going to be effective this year? Do you think he's going to play all 17 games now because the NFL added an extra game? Do you think that Ben Roethlisberger is going to be good for the next year or two, or maybe you turn next year and be like, okay, maybe we trade up to get Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields. It depends on Ben Roethlisberger coming off of that elbow injury. So that's going to be a big thing that only the Steelers are going to really know. And then, of course, you've got Jalen Rigor or J.K. Dobbins. I kind of throw those two one and the same. I like Jonathan Taylor. He's one of my favorite backs in this class. But the thing with Jonathan Taylor is workload. He was the workhorse in Wisconsin. So I think maybe either Cesar Ruiz, Jalen Hurts, I think you got to give a thought to. And as my time is running short, I'd have to say either J.K. Dobbins or Jalen Rigor. One of those four players, I think Steelers fans would be more than happy to have.
And with that, I will move on to the LA Rams. Um, I don't, I don't really know what the Rams are doing right now, and that was kind of my thing with them last year. Um, I don't. They went to the Super Bowl a year before, and now last year, everybody was expecting big expectations from the Rams. They re-signed Jared Goff, and they got Jalen Ramsey, but they they got complacent. I don't really know how to gauge the Rams right now. Um, Maybe right now, again, I would roll Zach's way again. I would go running back. You just got rid of Todd Gurley. You have probably I mean, what do they have as far as running back? They have Darrell Henderson. I know who they got. Um, but I mean, still, they just got rid of their projected. I was personally really surprised by how they got rid of um, Todd Gurley. But right now they have Malcolm Brown, Darrell Henderson as their top two backs. So I think with their first draft need, when it gets to their time at pick number 20, so that would be 52. At their first pick, I think they need to address running back. So they need to address running back. Again, if Taylor ends up sliding, me personally, I think at 52, Dobbins, Jonathan Taylor are gone. Um, a, a back that may actually be there at 52 is Cam Akers from Florida State, who I've seen sliding down some boards. I think that would be a good pickup for the Rams at 52. I think that's a big need for Jared Goff. Um, Jared Goff is a consistent, and he works well with Sean McVay, and that's why Sean McVay and him worked so well together. Is why they got to that Super Bowl a couple years ago. But I think that the Rams, like it's again, the Rams are a couple. If they just improve a couple areas on their team, they can be so good. And once Jared Goff gets more experience under his belt, I definitely think they can make Super Bowl pushes once um, they can get a couple players around Jared Goff and on the other side of the ball as well too.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. The Rams are super confusing right now. And I think you're about to see the Rams turn and try to rebuild a little bit. Um, one thing that I will say is this Rams defense is an Aaron Donald injury away from being irrelevant. Um, and that's scary. Eric Weddle retired. You have Jalen Ramsey, yeah, but this team just keeps losing players, and Ndamukong Suh has left them already. You don't have that dynamic middle linebacker anymore. So for me, my needs for the Rams are running back, wide receiver, tackle, interior linebacker, and free safety. Um, I can ride the train naming specific players, but there's too many needs in my opinion for this Rams team. Um, Jared Goff has just not been good. I think that I'd like to see Jared Goff get somebody else under there. You got Cooper Kupp, but like that's a problem in and of itself as well. Cooper Kupp is the only receiver on this team after Brandon Cooks gets traded. You don't have any running backs after Todd Gurley's gone. Your tight end is Gerald Everett. So I look at it in that perspective. Um, I can't name specific players because there's a lot of needs.
Mhm.
So that's the way I look at it.
I think so too. Like I said, that's why I kind of started it that way too. Is just the Rams are confusing right now. Like I said, they were a Super Bowl bound team a couple years ago. They played against the Pats in the Super Bowl, and then all of a sudden they fall and they go what 7-9 or 8, probably 8-8 is probably what they went this year. Um, and they had kind of a meh average year, and that's not what people were expecting from them this year either. So I guess moving on here. Um, excuse me. Uh, with we got two more teams left, and both of them are in the AFC South. I'll let you. Would you rather talk about Houston or Indy?
Um, I think I'd rather talk Houston
Houston.
because
For,
Bill O'Brien's about to get talked about.
all right, for sure. I'll let you take Houston.
Okay, Houston, my friends. Where do I begin? First of all, okay, Bill O'Brien is not a competent GM. And I'm going to be as nice about this as possible. Bill O'Brien just he gave away, in my opinion, the best wide receiver in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
You traded away Deshaun freaking Hopkins.
DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah, that too. DeAndre Hopkins. Deshaun Watson's not far behind.
Yeah, probably not with how that was. Yeah.
Hopkins is phenomenal. He's got the best hands. You can throw a ball up in the air anywhere near him, and if it's there, it's his. Um, it's he's the premier wide receiver in the NFL. He's exactly what you want. Um, and you traded him away for David Johnson and I think a pick or two. And that's nothing. The Bills got Stephon Diggs for a first round pick. That's ridiculous. So in that regard, I need to say that. Um, Plus, apparently, Deshaun Watson is next to go. Deshaun Watson reportedly is wanted out of Houston, and maybe not. So we'll see what happens with that. As in terms of team needs, they need a tight end badly. Darren Fells, I believe, is their tight end.
Mm-hmm.
If they want to get better, they do need a tight end, but there's not a lot of great tight ends in this class. Maybe Cole Kmet in the second round. Um, then you need wide receiver. You got Kenny Stills, you got Randall Cobb, and you've got Will Fuller. Will Fuller's had a lot of injury problems. Um, the big one with him is the lower leg injury.
Mm,
Um, I'm concerned about the production of Randall Cobb. He is old. He did do pretty well in Dallas. So we'll see how he does in Houston with a new quarterback with Deshaun Watson. Um, I also have on here as a need for Houston middle linebacker and nose tackle. So it's a defensive thing. But the thing with Houston is that they're in a division now where Tennessee kind of controls its own fate. Um, I mean, you got Indy still in there. You still have Jacksonville in there. But it's that kind of deal. I'm trying to be as nice as I can to Bill O'Brien. Um, I don't agree with the moves he's made. I don't like head coaches being the GM as well as the head coach. Um, so that's my 2 cents about it. You got to have two separate entities. Um, and I mean, you can't be a great head coach and be focused on your team all the time when you're also sitting there fielding every single phone call for every single player, dropping, adding players, transactions, and everything. You won't be able to focus on it. And that's where you've got the problem. So I think that the biggest need for the Texans this offseason is a GM.
hmm,
But because you can't exactly go just trade for one of those, um, I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna say, you probably need to go with either like a wide receiver here or go defense and grab the best middle linebacker on the board.
hmm,
So maybe like a Terrell Lewis, who can play edge as well as middle linebacker.
hmm. Yeah, I agree with all your points. There's so much wrong with that DeAndre Hopkins trade. It's wild. How they ended up not getting a first, like the first round pick from Arizona too, for somebody with the caliber that DeAndre Hopkins is. It's wild to me. Why they did that is still wild to me. For getting a player like that too. Um, and I guess going across the division here, I've got the Indianapolis Colts, and this is our last team that's not picking in round one. They'll have a pick pretty decently early in round two. Uh, excuse me, they're going to have a pick. They were 13 in round one, so that means doing quick math, they're going to be pick 45 in round two. And just scrolling through their depth chart here, I mean, they have T.Y. Hilton, Zach Pascal, and Paris Campbell as their wideouts. So T.Y. Hilton, we know is great. Excuse me.
But he's old.
But he is getting old. Zach Pascal showed up a little bit last year, and Paris Campbell was hurt for a couple games last year. I think maybe you add a little bit of wide receiver depth to this team. Again, looking at their roster, their second stringers after those wide receivers are kind of booty. Um, Tight end, you have Jack Doyle, who's great, but again, you don't have somebody that can be on a two tight end set with Jack Doyle to run block for Marlon Mack and Naheem Hines. They have I have no problems with their offensive line. Their offensive line's probably one of a top three offensive line in the league. Their offensive line's outstanding. They got DeForest Buckner on their defensive line now, but maybe somebody they have Justin Houston on one side with DeForest Buckner, and then they have Danico Autry and Al-Quadin Muhammad on the other. Maybe somebody to replace Al-Quadin Muhammad is also a possibility for somebody on the edge to rush the quarterback on the other side. So Justin Houston and DeForest Buckner um, are getting a lot of attention already. So maybe somebody on that other side, an edge rusher, if Zach Bond were to maybe not be taken, or somebody early right there, like an interior defensive lineman to replace Danico Autry or Al-Quadin Muhammad with an edge. I also see right here. I like their back end of Rocky Sin, Kenny Moore, Curry Willis, and Malik Hooker. I like that back end. They added Xavier Rhodes as well to come in. He kind of struggled in Minnesota, but maybe coming into a system like Indianapolis, he can play more in nickel sets, so he doesn't have to be relied on as much. So I think that's a good place for him to go, is to be set right here. Um, but Darius Leonard's one of the best emerging uh, linebackers coming into the league now. They have Bobby Okereke, who their round pick was last year, and Anthony Walker. So maybe they can add some depth to those positions because, again, they don't have a lot of depth right here as far as linebacker. So maybe they can add depth at a couple positions. So those are just a couple of my positions that I think Indianapolis should look at. You still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, for sure.
I agree completely. Indy's problems are on the defensive side of the ball. Um, Either that or maybe Philip Rivers at quarterback. To me, um, with them bringing in Philip Rivers, it shows that they don't have faith in Jacoby Brissett.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether that means that they go with Philip Rivers next year, he's only signed for a 1 year deal. Um, he's 30 something years old. Actually, I think he's close to his 40s now too, but he's like 38 or something. Um, he doesn't want to play in the NFL forever. He didn't have the best of seasons in the NFL last year, as in terms of turnovers. Um, it's that type of way. So maybe a quarterback in Indy's future. I don't know if Jacoby Brissett, um, is the future for these guys. Maybe you see Jacoby Brissett get traded back to New England for like a third round pick or a second round pick. I think that offensive line is great. T.Y. Hilton's aging, so maybe a receiver is needed. Darius Leonard is phenomenal. This Colts defense is awesome.
Mm-hmm. They
It's
had a great young developmental defense that can develop into a great defense in the league, I think.
if I'm looking at it, the biggest need for this team is on the offensive side of the ball,
Wide receiver.
either wide receiver or quarterback. It depends on what they need to view it as.
Yep.
Um, So and or maybe even a tight end too. With Eric Ebron walking out, they have a lot of faith in Jack Doyle. Um, and the other position that maybe they should look at is offensive tackle. Anthony Costanzo, um, debated uh retirement. Um, but I mean, we'll see what ends up happening with Costanzo. But he decided to come back for another year, and back he came. So we'll see what ends up happening.
Mm-hmm.
But that would be what I would suggest um with the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah. Well, I think we've kept people on the loop for long enough. Um, it's definitely been fun. Um, this is again this is all speculation. This isn't anything. We're not working for anybody. This is our own personal opinion. We're not representing BGSU. We're not representing anything except for our own show and our own opinion. Um, so we appreciate you all riding along with us. Um, Again, this is what we want to do. We're doing this completely for fun. Like I said, this is what we want to do eventually when we get into the real world here is go into sports media. And again, like Zach alluded in the first episode of this, we don't just want to do football. We want to talk a lot of different sports. For example, I play tennis. I'm a big tennis person. Um, so I can talk about some of the different majors, some of the different players that I like, how they hit the tennis ball. I mean, it's a big difference talking about different defenses and coverages, and going from that to talking about who's the next heir apparent to the big three in tennis. So it's definitely going to be a fun ride. Um, I think we're going to do also a post draft analysis on what happens, right, Zach?
Yeah, I think that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna look at what team benefited throughout free agency as well as the draft. We could go with free agency soon here, but I think it's better to look at a more holistic standpoint. So, what team got better the most through the off season? What team struggled the most throughout the off season? We'll go through some potential playoff picks, division winners, and a very, very early Super Bowl prediction. There's so much to talk about with sports,
Mhm.
especially right now with the coronavirus going on, and the NBA playoffs were supposed to start today.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be in the very beginning of the MLB season. Hockey, we should be well into hockey season, near playoffs.
Mhm.
The NFL is kind of the thing that's keeping a lot of sports people going right now. If this is something you guys liked, feel free to let us know. We're happy to continue to do this and get our opinions. We're happy to reach out to other people too and see who we all can't get involved with the show. Um, Thank you for listening in. There are a lot of mistakes that happen on. It's all and to quote the show, it's all a work in progress. Um, you know, I kind of forgot about the Philadelphia Eagles, so sorry, Philly fans. Um, but yeah, if this is something you want to hear more of, if you want to hear more of Jordan and me talking about other sports, plenty of MLB, NBA, NFL knowledge between us all. NHL, we can get in here. Um, but this was a lot of fun to do. Football is so much fun to do. The draft, again, as we're recording this, is 5 days away. April 23rd is when the first round is going, and the Cincinnati Bengals will be on the clock. Um, One last time, I guess we can go through here and um, just say thank you again.
32.
Um,
Do you want to go through the 32 or not really?
I mean, you kind of have gone through it a lot.
Yeah.
We'll find a way to get this posted out somewhere that you can just see our picks,
Mhm.
and maybe go through a condensed written version of why we like these picks. But 100%, we're gonna get our names out here a little more.
Mhm.
Um, and if you like again what you hear, please feel free to let us know. This work in progress is going to continue to get better and better.
Mhm.
So,
Yep, I
you know,
largely agree. Took the words. You took the words right out of my mouth too. Again, we're gonna do more things. Try to get, especially with quarantine going on. I think we can definitely. This is a thing that's really great to do. Is that we can sit down and just talk sports and talk different things. So the next stuff again that we'll have out is post draft analysis. What teams? What are a couple teams that we think benefited? What are the teams that we don't think did enough or had a crappy draft? Who do we see as playoff teams and the Super Bowl team that Zach had talked about? So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Again, give as much suggestions as you can for stuff that you would like to hear or things that you would like to hear us talk about. And we will see you in the next video or podcast. Bye bye. Hello, everybody. It's your favorite two boys here again. Just wanted to preface that this is not for any organization or affiliation other than Zach Smith and Jordan Menning, which is us two. The only reasons we say the things at the beginning of these videos are for the fact of that these might be use for BGSU and Falcon Radio because we're involved students at Bowling Green State University. So that is the only reason we say these in the beginning of these videos. So this is for non-commercial use. This is just for us doing what we want to do. Just right now, getting ourselves started on YouTube before we actually get back to BGSU in the fall to do our show in the fall. Zach, if you have anything that I missed out on or anything you'd like to say real quick.
Yeah, this channel is purely our opinions. There could be fact mixed in there, but for the most part, it is not mostly our opinions. We are like this channel is not affiliated with Bowling Green State University, any major league sports, so the MLB, the NBA, the NFL, the NHL. This is purely our opinion. We're doing this for fun. We're doing this for uh, just something to talk about and something to do. This is something we truly do enjoy talking about, truly love doing, and yeah, we don't really want it to come across that we're associated with anybody as in terms of our opinions and what he and I say.
Mhm.
um, we will eventually be on a radio, and it's still our opinions and it's still what we believe, even though we go through another uh, broadcast point. So again,
Exactly.
we're sports fans, we're entitled to our opinion, and we hope that people treat it as such.
Awesome. All right. Thank you guys for your understanding, and we will see you guys in the next video.